Somewhere in New Mexico right now, the sky is orange in the daytime and red at night. That's not a filter. That's smoke and fire happening at the exact same time. Hold that image because we're coming back to it. And that's not even the only thing happening right now. A heat dome is baking the eastern half of this continent. A tropical storm is slamming into the Gulf Coast. Wildfire smoke is choking cities 1,000 miles from any actual fire, and violent storms are ripping across the Midwest. 5 disasters, one continent, all at the same time. And honestly, this isn't 5 unlucky things happening to land in the same month. It's one weather system, doing 5 different kinds of damage across 60% of North America. Over 25,000 people got displaced. More than 1,400 homes were destroyed in one town alone. By the end of this, you'll know exactly what locked that system in place. You'll know why it already killed someone once before under this exact same mechanism. And you'll know the specific numbers scientists are watching right now to see if it happens again. No guessing here. No dramatizing. Just the mechanism and the record it already left behind. This all played out over about 2 weeks. June 14th through the 28th, 2024. And it didn't stay in one place. It stretched from the deserts of interior Mexico, all the way up to the boreal forests of Alberta and British Columbia, from the Pacific coast of California to the Atlantic seaboard. That's most of a continent under one system. At the center of it sat a dome, a massive ridge of high pressure stuck in the jet stream, refusing to move. Meteorologists call it an omega block because on a map it curves like the Greek letter omega. But look, forget the Greek letter. You just need one thing. It got stuck, and it stayed stuck. NOAA and the National Weather Service were tracking it in real time. So was Environment and Climate Change Canada watching from their side of the border. 2 countries, one stuck sky. Here's something we'll come back to later. Because of an almost identical version of this exact system 3 years earlier, a woman's death is now sitting inside a courtroom, in a lawsuit that could decide who's actually responsible when a dome like this kills someone. We'll get to that. Most people think a heat wave story ends with a thermometer. This one doesn't. Yeah, this one really doesn't. Because the dome doesn't just make things hot. It triggers a chain reaction. And once you see the chain, you can't unsee it. Here's why it forms in the first place. Up in the jet stream, air normally moves west to east, in long, rolling waves. But sometimes those waves stop moving, they stall. And when a big ridge of high pressure stalls like that, the air underneath it starts sinking toward the ground. Sinking air gets squeezed, and squeezed air heats up. I mean, that's just physics. It's the same reason a bicycle pump gets warm in your hand when you push the plunger down fast. The dome works the same way. Except instead of your hand, it's the entire atmosphere doing the pushing. For days at a time. Think of it like a pressure cooker, sitting on a stove that never turns off. The heat keeps building underneath the lid, with nowhere to go. And a pressure cooker with a stuck release valve doesn't just sit there quietly. Eventually something has to give. On the dome, that something is the edge. Because while the center of the dome stays dry and cooking, the edges are a completely different story. That's where the pressure finds its leak. Meteorologists call it the ring of fire. A band of violent storms circling the outside of the dome, like sparks around a flame. And this is where the first real damage starts stacking up. Storms forming along that edge tapped into extreme instability. Some estimates put the stored energy, what meteorologists call CAPE, above 3,000 joules per kilogram in spots. Translate that, and it just means the atmosphere had several times the normal fuel for a violent storm. One of those systems became Tropical Storm Alberto. It dumped 12.4 inches of rain on northeast Mexico, about 315 millimeters. Around the same window, parts of central Texas saw rainfall exceeding 20 inches, 50 centimeters, and the Guadalupe River crested 37 feet above its flood stage. That's 11.2 meters. Let that number sit for a second. 37 feet above flood stage. From storms that only exist because the dome pushed them out to its own edge. Now follow the chain to the other side of the dome, because the same heat doing all of that is also drying everything out underneath it. There's a measurement for this: vapor pressure deficit. It's really just the gap between how much moisture is in the air and how much the air could actually hold. When the dome pushes temperatures up, that gap widens fast, and it starts pulling moisture straight out of the ground and out of every tree in its path. First, the ground dried out. Relative humidity in parts of the plains dropped to 10 to 15%. Second, the vegetation itself became fuel. Satellite imagery from MODIS tracked that stress directly. In New Mexico, the South Fork fire alone burned through 23,000 acres, about 9,300 hectares. Honestly, that's hard to picture. It's something like 18,000 football fields, burning at once. And fires that intense don't just burn, they breathe. The largest ones generate their own storm clouds called pyrocumulonimbus. They act like elevators, lifting smoke and soot as high as 12 miles into the sky, 19 kilometers up, straight into the stratosphere. That smoke didn't stay over the fire. It drifted for hundreds of miles. And cities that had nothing to do with any wildfire started choking on it anyway. EPA monitors recorded fine particle pollution at 118 micrograms per cubic meter in Minneapolis. In Detroit and Chicago, the air quality index hit 361, a level officially classified as hazardous. Okay, so by now you've got a dome cooking the middle of the continent, storms flooding its edges, wildfires burning underneath it, and smoke poisoning the air for 1,000 miles around it. And look, there's still one more piece. Because all of that heat and haze eventually hits the machines that keep the lights on. Extreme heat makes power lines physically sag. That cuts how much electricity they can safely carry. A study from the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory found the heat also drags down the efficiency of natural gas turbines by up to 25%, right when demand for air conditioning is at its highest, and thick wildfire smoke blocks enough sunlight to cut solar power generation by 30 to 40%. Grid operators have a name for that particular nightmare. They call it the duck curve. It means the exact moment everyone needs power the most is the exact moment the grid has the least. The dome doesn't cause one disaster. It manufactures 4 more. Now let's talk about the last time a dome like this actually formed, because this isn't the first time. Go back to June of 2012. Yeah, the exact same setup happened. A massive ridge locked into place, a ring of fire ignited along its edge, and a small thunderstorm complex riding that edge exploded into something meteorologists call a derecho, basically a hurricane made of straight-line wind, moving overland at highway speed. It tore from the Midwest to the Mid-Atlantic. In a single night, 22 people died across 7 states and Washington, D.C., mostly from falling trees. Total damage came to $2.9 billion in 2012 dollars, an amount that would run considerably higher today. Over 4.2 million customers lost power, and in Virginia and West Virginia, 911 emergency service collapsed for more than 2 million people, in some places for days, because the phone switching equipment failed right along with the grid. Honestly, here's the detail that should actually worry you. That same storm even knocked out an Amazon data center in Virginia. It took down Netflix and Instagram for people who had nothing to do with any of this, hundreds of miles away, one stuck dome, and it reached that far. Now go forward to 2021, same mechanism, different location. A heat dome locked over the Pacific Northwest, a region full of homes that were never built with air conditioning, because nobody thought they'd need it. British Columbia's own coroner confirmed 619 heat-related deaths during that event. The town of Lytton hit 49.6 degrees Celsius, 121.3 degrees Fahrenheit, Canada's highest temperature ever recorded, and then it burned to the ground. Over 217 evacuation orders went out across Canada, displacing more than 50,000 people, the highest number in 4 decades of records. Both the United States and Canada hit their highest national emergency response level at the same time, which meant neither country had spare firefighters left to lend the other one. That's the same mechanism that came back in 2024. It's also worth knowing this wasn't even the biggest one on record. Back in 1988, a similar blocked ridge sat over the country for months. The resulting drought and heat killed somewhere between 4,800 and 17,000 people, with damage totaling $60 billion at the time, about $163 billion in today's money. So this thing keeps coming back. Same lock in the jet stream, different decade, different coastline. Now a quick reality check, because stories like this usually get stretched in one direction or the other online. Look, this wasn't the deadliest disaster in American history. The 1988 drought killed more people. This wasn't even the hottest single reading ever recorded on the continent. Lytton still holds that record from 2021. What made 2024 different wasn't the death toll. It was the footprint. 60% of an entire continent, hit by heat, hit by storms, hit by fire and smoke, all from one stuck dome, all inside 2 weeks. That combination has never been measured at this scale before. And honestly, I should be upfront about the pressure cooker comparison too, because it's not perfect. A real pressure cooker traps steam, that's wet heat. A heat dome does the opposite. It creates bone-dry air. The comparison works for the trapped pressure part. It just breaks down on the moisture. This is not a doomsday event. It's the biggest compound stress test the continent's infrastructure has ever faced. Whenever something this size shows up in the sky, the same conspiracy theories show up right behind it. And honestly, they deserve a straight answer instead of silence. One claim that spread fast online said the government, or the military, created that stuck dome on purpose, using something like HAARP, a real but small research facility that beams radio signals into the upper atmosphere. Here's the problem with that, and it's a big one. Locking a high-pressure ridge over 60% of a continent takes an amount of energy measured in gigawatts. A facility like HAARP operates in the megawatt range. That's not a small gap. That's the difference between a flashlight and a lightning bolt. There is no human technology on Earth that operates anywhere close to the scale required to hold a jet stream in place. A second claim said the smoke choking those cities wasn't wildfire smoke at all, that it was chemicals sprayed from planes. Real air monitors settle that one fast. The particles in that haze were tested. They matched burned trees and burned brush, down to the chemical signature, not anything sprayed. Now here's a debate that's actually real, and legitimate scientists are genuinely split on it. Some researchers argue the Arctic warming faster than the rest of the planet is weakening the jet stream, making it wavier, more likely to get stuck in patterns exactly like this one. Other, equally serious scientists aren't convinced. They think the ridges themselves aren't happening more often. They think the atmosphere underneath them is simply hotter than it used to be. So an ordinary stuck pattern now produces an extraordinary heat wave. Nobody has settled that argument yet, and I'm not going to pretend they have. Honestly, the concern underneath both fringe claims is real. People are right to be unsettled by something this size. They're just pointing the worry at the wrong cause. So here's exactly what scientists and emergency managers are watching for right now, to see if a dome like this builds again. Yeah, these are the signals. They're watching a drought index called SPEI. Once it drops to negative 0.5 or lower, that's the official mark of a drought taking hold. They're watching soil moisture. Once it falls under 30%, plants stop holding water and start becoming fuel instead. They're watching the national wildfire preparedness level. Level 5 means every available firefighter in the country is already committed, nothing left in reserve. They're watching overnight low temperatures. A night that never drops below 75 degrees Fahrenheit, 24 degrees Celsius, means bodies never actually get to recover. And they're watching the power grid's emergency alert levels. Because once reserves fall far enough, the only option left is rolling blackouts. A change in any one of those numbers moves the needle. And honestly, more than one of them is already trending the wrong way. And remember that lawsuit I mentioned earlier. It's about to become very relevant. Let's get specific about what this actually did to real people. Because facts without that part just create anxiety. During that 2021 heat dome we just talked about in Seattle, a 65-year-old woman named Juliana Leon died of hypothermia. Her body simply couldn't cool down anymore. It happened on the hottest day ever recorded in Washington state. Temperatures in Seattle peaked around 108 degrees, 42 degrees Celsius. 4 years later, in May of 2025, her daughter Misty Leon filed a wrongful death lawsuit against several major oil companies, including ExxonMobil, Chevron, and Shell. It's the first lawsuit of its kind, trying to hold an entire industry legally responsible for one specific climate death. The lawsuit argues it would be a mistake to call her death a random accident, when her family says the risk was foreseeable all along. Aaron Regunberg, a director at the advocacy group Public Citizen, told reporters that disasters like this one are the foreseeable result of decisions made by fossil fuel companies. That case is still moving through the courts right now. Now bring it back to 2024. There's a small town called Ruidoso in New Mexico. It sat inside all 5 hazards at once, and honestly this is the part that stuck with me most. Survivors there described the sky turning orange with smoke during the day, and the horizon glowing red with fire at night. Remember that image from the very start of this video. That's exactly where it came from. And when people tried to actually drive out, their evacuation routes were blocked. Not by the fire behind them, but by flash floods and thunderstorms from that same dome's edge, coming from the opposite direction. There was no safe direction to run in. I mean, that's not a metaphor, that's what actually happened to the people living under all 5 of these hazards at once. Zoom out for a second, because, yeah, 2024 isn't really the story. It's a symptom of a bigger one. Stalled jet stream patterns like this have roughly tripled since the 1950s. Fire seasons around the world now run 19% longer than they did in the late 70s. In California alone, the amount of land burned in a typical summer is almost 5 times higher than it was 30 years ago. And there's a quieter cost too, one that doesn't show up in any of these numbers. A man named Stephen Murray survived the 2018 wildfire that destroyed his town of Paradise, California. When a new evacuation warning came through in 2024, he told reporters it put him right back into nightmares, remembering that people died the last time simply because they went to sleep and never woke up. Honestly, that's what repeated disasters do to a person. Long after the smoke actually clears, the infrastructure holding all of this together, the power grids, the water systems, the hospitals, was built for a climate that doesn't exist anymore. So picture that opening moment again. 5 things happening at once, across one continent, all coming out of a single stuck dome in the sky. That lawsuit we mentioned is still working its way through the courts right now. If Misty Leon's case against those oil companies actually succeeds, it could change who gets held legally responsible. The next time a dome like this forms and someone doesn't survive it, I mean, that's not a small thing. That's a completely new kind of accountability, one that didn't exist before 2025. Here's the honest truth. Nobody can tell you exactly when the next one forms. or exactly where it lands. What we can tell you is what to watch: the drought index, the reserve margins on the power grid, the national preparedness level. Those numbers move first, before the disaster does. The dome isn't the exception anymore. It's becoming the baseline. And the real question isn't whether another one forms. It's whether the ground underneath it, the grid, the hospitals, the evacuation routes, will actually be ready. Because there's no safe direction when a system this size decides where to hit next. We'll be tracking every one of those numbers as they move. And we'll bring you the update the moment something changes.